Alex's fingers trembled as he gripped the cold metal of his locker, the jeers of his classmates echoing in his ears. He could feel their eyes on him, scorching with mockery and disdain. His heart pounded furiously, each beat a painful reminder of the fear that had become his daily companion. As he fumbled with the combination lock, a group of boys sauntered past, their laughter slicing through the air like knives. "Hey, scaredy cat!" one of them called out, his voice dripping with contempt. "Forgot how to open your locker again? Maybe you should ask your mummy for help." Alex's cheeks burned with shame. He shrank into himself, wishing he could dissolve into the cold metal of the lockers, become invisible. He had once been a bright, outgoing child, but months of relentless bullying had dimmed his light, leaving behind only a fragile shell of who he used to be. As he finally managed to open his locker, a sudden force slammed it shut, nearly catching his fingers. Alex recoiled, his breath hitching as he turned to see Derek, the ringleader of his tormentors. Derek's lips curled into a cruel smirk as he loomed over him, his presence suffocating. "What's the matter, Alex? Cat got your tongue," Derek taunted, his voice low and menacing. "Or are you just too scared to speak?" Alex's throat constricted, words dissolving before they could form. He wanted to stand up for himself, to find the strength to fight back, but fear wrapped around him like chains, holding him still. Derek's hand shot out, gripping the front of Alex's shirt. For a fleeting second, panic gripped him, until a sharp voice rang out from down the hall. A teacher. Derek released him with a final sneer, melting into the crowd of students. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety and dread. Alex drifted through the halls like a ghost, his once vibrant personality reduced to a quiet, fearful existence. In class, he sat hunched over his desk, his gaze fixed downward, afraid to meet anyone's eyes. When the teacher called on him, his voice came out barely above a whisper, earning muffled snickers from his classmates. At home, his parents exchanged worried glances over dinner as Alex pushed his food around his plate, untouched. They had noticed the changes, the way his shoulders slumped, how his eyes had lost their usual spark. Their gentle attempts to draw him out were met with silence, a wall between them that grew thicker each day. "Honey, did something happen at school today?" his mother asked softly, reaching for his hand. Alex flinched at the warmth of her touch and quickly pulled away. "I'm fine," he mumbled, the lie bitter on his tongue. He couldn't bear the concern in their eyes, the way they watched him with helplessness. How could he explain the constant fear, the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare with no escape? That night, as Alex lay in bed, tears soaked his pillow. He felt more alone than ever, his world shrinking, suffocating him. Sleep eluded him, his mind replaying every taunt, every shove, every humiliation in agonizing detail. The next afternoon, as Alex trudged home from another day of torment, something caught his eye. A small dojo nestled between a convenience store and a laundromat, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. He had passed it countless times before, but today something made him pause. Through the window he saw a group of children his age moving in perfect synchronization. Their faces were set in concentration, their movements fluid and powerful. As Alex watched, transfixed, a man in a white GI turned and met his gaze. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, Alex felt something stir deep within him, something fragile yet undeniable. Hope. The sensei's gaze was kind, free of the judgment and cruelty Alex had grown used to. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine it, to picture himself in there, standing strong, moving with the same quiet confidence as the others. But then reality came crashing down. What if he made a fool of himself? What if they laughed at him? As he stood frozen, torn between fear and this unexpected flicker of possibility, the sensei gave him a small, encouraging nod. It was a simple gesture, but it pierced through the layers of doubt and self-loathing that had weighed him down for so long. Taking a deep breath, Alex took a tentative step forward. His hand trembled as it reached for the door handle, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to retreat to the safety of his isolation. But something deeper pushed him forward, a desperate need for change, for an escape from the darkness that had consumed him. As the door closed behind him, the noise of the outside world faded. The air inside the dojo was thick with the scent of sweat and determination. Alex stood just inside the entrance, his heart hammering as the sensei approached with a warm, reassuring smile. "Welcome," the man said, his voice steady and calm. "I'm Sensei Mike. What's your name?" Alex," he stammered, barely above a whisper. Sensei Mike's smile widened. "Well, Alex, would you like to join us today?" Alex's heart pounded as he stepped onto the mat, his fingers fumbling as they tied the crisp white belt around his waist. The dojo's polished wooden floor gleamed beneath his bare feet, a silent witness to the journey ahead. Around him, the other students stood with confidence, their stances firm and assured. Alex, in contrast, felt like an imposter, his posture hesitant, his movements uncertain. Yet, beneath the anxiety, a flicker of hope remained. The first days of training were a brutal awakening. Every muscle in his body screamed as Sensei Mike led the class through a series of fundamental stances. "Hold it, Alex!" The instructor's firm voice cut through the air. "Feet wider, back straight." Alex struggled to obey, his legs quivering, sweat already beading on his forehead. The others moved effortlessly, their synchronization a painful contrast to his own unsteady form. As the days passed, the rigorous training tested him in ways he hadn't expected. Each session felt endless, his body aching from exertion. During one particularly grueling exercise, memories of Derek's taunts echoed in his mind, loud and suffocating. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, the old feeling of helplessness creeping in. Just as he was about to crumble, a firm yet gentle hand rested on his shoulder. "Breathe, Alex," Sensei Mike said, his voice steady. "Focus on this moment. You're stronger than you know." Those words became a lifeline, anchoring Alex when doubt threatened to overwhelm him. As weeks turned into months, his body began to change. Where once he had felt weak, now there was a quiet strength growing in his limbs. His stances became steadier, his movements more deliberate. Yet, despite his progress, his mind still lagged behind. During sparring sessions, Alex hesitated. His instinct screamed at him to react, to strike, but his body remained frozen. The memories of past humiliation still had a hold on him. His opponents would take advantage of his hesitation, striking before he could recover. One evening, after the last class of the day, Sensei Mike approached him. The dojo was quiet, the hum of the city outside barely audible. "You've come a long way," the instructor said, studying him with perceptive eyes. "But something is holding you back. What is it you fear, Alex?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any physical challenge he had faced. Alex swallowed, his throat tight. How could he explain the weight of those years of torment? The way fear had become a part of him, woven into his very being. Sensing his hesitation, Sensei Mike led him to a quiet corner of the dojo. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Picture the person you want to become. Not just here, in the dojo, but in life. What does that version of you look like?" Alex furrowed his brow in concentration. At first his mind was a blank slate, but slowly an image began to take shape, a version of himself standing tall, unshaken, his eyes clear and steady. "Now," Sensei Mike continued, "each time you step onto this mat, I want you to embody that person. Let go of who you were, step into who you can be." That night, Alex lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The faces of his tormentors flashed through his mind. But for the first time, he saw something beyond their cruelty. He saw himself strong, capable, unafraid. A quiet determination settled over him. No more running, no more hiding. The next day, Alex arrived at the dojo with a fire in his eyes. He moved through the katas with precision, each punch and kick carrying a newfound purpose. When sparring began, he no longer hesitated. He met his opponent's strikes with measured counterattacks, his movements fluid and intentional. Sensei Mike watched from the sidelines, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Weeks passed. and Alex's transformation deepened. The dojo was no longer just a training ground. It was a place of rebirth. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle was proof of how far he had come. He no longer flinched at the thought of confrontation. Instead, he faced it with steady resolve. One afternoon, during a particularly intense session, something remarkable happened. As Alex moved through a complex kata, the world around him faded. The noise of the dojo, the presence of the other students, everything blurred into the background. His breath and movements synchronized in perfect harmony. In that moment, he wasn't just executing techniques. He was embodying the strength he had always sought. As the class ended, he caught his reflection in the dojo's mirror. The boy, looking back at him, was almost unrecognizable. His shoulders squared, his posture strong, a quiet confidence radiating from within. For the first time in months, Alex felt something he had forgotten was possible: pride. Alex's heart thundered in his chest as he approached the school entrance, his fingers briefly brushing over the collar of his shirt where his white belt usually rested. The familiar scent of chalk and floor cleaner mingled with the musty odor of old textbooks. But something felt different. It wasn't the school that had changed, it was Alex himself. As he strode down the hallway, his back straight and chin lifted, he caught sight of his reflection in a trophy case. The boy staring back at him was no longer the timid, hunched figure he had been before summer break. This Alex stood taller, his eyes clear and steady, a quiet strength emanating from within. He took a deep breath, centering himself as Sensei Mike had taught him, and kept walking. The usual buzz of morning chatter hushed as students turned to look at him. Whispers rippled through the crowd, their gazes a mix of curiosity and surprise. Alex felt their attention pressing in on him, but instead of shrinking away, he met their eyes with calm resolve. A few classmates offered tentative smiles, acknowledgements of the change in him. As Alex rounded the corner to his locker, a familiar chill ran down his spine. Derek and his gang lounged against the wall, their casual postures hiding the predatory gleam in their eyes. The moment Derek spotted him, his expression darkened, his usual sneer curling at the edges. Well, Derek drawled, pushing off the wall and striding toward him. Look who decided to show his face. Have a good summer, wimp? Alex's fingers trembled slightly as he spun the lock, but his voice was steady when he replied, It was great, thanks. How was yours? Derek's smirk faltered, momentarily thrown off by Alex's composed response. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face before he masked it with mockery. Think you're tough now, huh? He stepped closer, his presence looming. Alex closed his locker and turned to face Derek fully, his heart hammering, but his stance unwavering. He could feel the weight of the crowd gathering, their hushed murmurs thick with anticipation. This was the moment. A crossroads. He had a choice to make, not just about this confrontation, but about the kind of person he wanted to be. I don't think I'm tough, Alex said, his voice calm but firm. I just don't want any trouble. Derek's fists clenched at his sides, his face darkening with frustration. Too bad, because trouble's what you're gonna get. As Derek's arm pulled back, time slowed. Instinct took over. Alex's training surged through him, his body moving with effortless precision. He shifted his weight, angling his stance just as Sensei Mike had taught him. Derek's punch whistled past his ear, his own momentum carrying him forward. Alex sidestepped smoothly, his movements controlled, deliberate. Derek stumbled, momentarily off balance, caught off guard by Alex's reaction. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by an eager chant. Fight! 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 But Alex didn't raise his fists. He didn't need to. He simply stood his ground, his hands open at his sides, ready but not aggressive. I don't want to fight you, Derek, he said, his voice cutting through the growing noise. Derek spun around, his face contorted with anger. What's the matter? Scared? Alex met his glare without flinching. No, he said simply. I'm not scared anymore, but fighting won't change anything. The words landed like a blow. The hallway fell into an uneasy silence, the tension thick between them. For the first time, Alex saw something beyond Derek's rage, a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in the armor of bravado. Alex remembered Sensei Mike's words about true strength, not just in the body but in the heart. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Derek could hear. "I get it," he said. "I used to be scared too. But it doesn't have to be like this." Derek's eyes widened, his mask of aggression wavering for the briefest moment. Then, as if realizing too many people were watching, he scoffed and stepped back. "Whatever," he muttered. "You're not even worth my time." With that, Derek turned on his heel, motioning for his gang to follow. They hesitated, casting uncertain glances between Alex and their leader before trailing after him. The crowd slowly began to disperse, murmurs of disbelief and admiration filling the air. "That was amazing! Did you see how he dodged that punch? I can't believe he stood up to Derek." Alex exhaled, tension seeping from his shoulders. He hadn't just avoided a fight. He had won in a way that mattered more than any physical battle. A few students clapped him on the back as they passed, their approval subtle but meaningful. For the first time in months, Alex felt something he hadn't in a long time. Seen, respected, free. As the summer days dwindled, a new challenge loomed on the horizon for Alex. The Regional Karate Championship, a proving ground for martial artists across the state, cast a long shadow over his thoughts. When Sensei Mike first suggested he enter, Alex had felt a rush of excitement, quickly followed by a gnawing wave of doubt. Now, as the date approached, those conflicting emotions intensified, swirling inside him like a storm. His training took on a new intensity. Each session at the dojo pushed him further than he thought possible. His muscles burned as he repeated katas until his body moved on instinct. Sweat dripped from his brow, pooling on the mat beneath his feet. Sensei Mike's voice was ever present, steady yet unyielding. "Remember, Alex," his mentor said, observing his form with a keen eye, "the greatest opponent you'll ever face is the one in your mind. Conquer that, and no external challenge can defeat you." Those words echoed in Alex's head at night as he lay in bed, his body aching but his resolve sharpening. He pictured himself standing on the competition mat, facing opponents with years of experience. Doubt whispered to him in the darkness, warning him of failure, of humiliation. But with each passing day, Alex found it easier to silence those voices. At home, his transformation didn't go unnoticed. His parents watched him with a mixture of pride and apprehension. His mother, who had spent months worrying over his withdrawn state, now saw fire in his eyes again. His father, who had once doubted karate's impact, now saw the discipline and determination shaping his son into someone new. One evening, as Alex practiced in the backyard, his father stepped outside, hands tucked into his pockets. He watched in silence for a moment before clearing his throat. "Son," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know we're proud of you. No matter what happens at that championship, you've already won in our eyes." Alex swallowed past the lump in his throat. He nodded, unable to find the words to respond. That night, as he closed his eyes, he felt something warm settle in his chest. Their belief in him was no longer just something he longed for. It was something he felt deep within himself. The day of the championship arrived with a crackling energy that seemed to charge the very air. The sports complex buzzed with movement, the scent of sweat and anticipation thick in the atmosphere. Everywhere Alex looked, competitors in crisp GIs stretched and paced, their expressions ranging from calm focus to jittery nerves. His first match came too quickly. As he stepped onto the mat, his heart pounded so hard he feared it might drown out the referee's whistle. His opponent, a boy with a green belt and an easy smirk, bowed slightly. Then, in an instant, the match was on. Alex moved on instinct, every strike and block a test of his training. His opponent was fast, but Alex was faster. Yet, despite his skill, hesitation still crept in, moments of doubt that cost him valuable points. When the final whistle blew, he had won, but barely. As the tournament progressed, each match pushed him to his limits. He faced competitors who were taller, stronger, more seasoned. But with each challenge, Alex found himself relying less on fear and more on trust. Trust in his body, in his training, in himself. Sensei Mike's lessons echoed in his mind. Breathe, focus, center yourself. Then at last, the final match loomed before him like a mountain. His opponent, a brown belt named Ryan, stood across the mat, his reputation for ruthless efficiency preceding him. As they bowed, Alex caught the same determination in Ryan's eyes that burned in his own. The match began, and Alex was thrown into the most grueling fight of his life. Ryan's attacks came fast and hard, each one testing Alex's defenses. His muscles screamed in protest as he dodged, blocked, countered. Sweat dripped into his eyes, blurring his vision. The roar of the crowd was distant, muffled beneath the sharp focus of the moment. Then, in a sudden moment of clarity, time seemed to slow. Ryan shifted his weight, just slightly, but enough for Alex to read his next move. Without thinking, his body reacted. He stepped in, executing a flawless counterstrike. The impact resonated through him, and even before the referee's whistle blew, he knew he had won. The crowd erupted, but Alex barely heard them. As the referee raised his hand in victory, his eyes searched for his family in the stands. His mother had tears in her eyes, his father beaming with pride. Sensei Mike stood with his arms crossed, a small but unmistakable smile on his face. But amidst the triumph, a deeper realization took hold of him. This victory wasn't just his own. It was for every kid who had ever felt powerless, every child who had been pushed down, mocked, made to feel small. He had won more than a match. He had won himself back. The roar of the crowd faded, replaced by a profound silence that settled over Alex like a wave. He had faced countless challenges in the dojo, in the tournament, in the hallways of his school, but now he stood before a different kind of battle. A room full of wide-eyed children stared at him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and quiet desperation. The local community center had invited him, the newly crowned regional champion, to speak to kids who had experienced bullying. As Alex gazed at them, he felt an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest. This moment, he realized, was bigger than any trophy or match. Memories of his own suffering surged through him, the fear, the isolation, the nights spent crying into his pillow. His palms grew clammy, a ghost of old anxieties creeping in. He could almost hear Derek's taunts echoing from the past, threatening to pull him back into that dark place. But then he took a breath, deep, steady, just as Sensei Mike had taught him. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about them, the children in front of him, looking for hope, for proof that things could change. With a voice that carried the weight of his journey, Alex began to speak. He told them about the boy he had once been, the one who had shrunk away from the world, who had believed he was weak. He spoke of the relentless bullying, the moments of crushing despair, and the hopelessness that had clung to him for so long. But then he told them about the dojo, about the pain of training, the moments he wanted to quit, the battles he had fought within himself. He spoke of finding strength not just in his fists, but in his heart. The children listened, their gazes fixed on him, their silence heavy with understanding. Alex saw something familiar in their eyes, the same flicker of hope that had first stirred in him when he looked through the dojo's window. That fragile, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Taking a chance, Alex smiled and asked, "Who wants to learn some moves?" A few children shifted uncertain. The silence stretched until finally a small boy at the back of the room hesitantly raised his hand. Alex's heart clenched. He recognized that posture, that uncertainty, the same way he had once tried to disappear into the background. He extended a hand toward the boy. "Come on," he encouraged gently. "I promise. It's not as scary as it looks." Slowly the boy stepped forward, his movements hesitant. When he reached Alex, his eyes flickered with nerves. Alex knelt beside him and demonstrated a simple stance. "It's not about being perfect," he said. "It's about believing in yourself, even when it's hard." As the boy mimicked his stance, his movements were shaky at first, unsteady. But with every correction, every bit of encouragement, something shifted. His shoulders squared, his gaze lifted. And for the first time since stepping forward, he smiled. The room changed. Other children started to rise, eager to try. A ripple of excitement passed through the group as they followed Alex's lead, their initial hesitation melting into determination. As Alex looked around at the children practicing, something deep inside him settled. This was what it was all for. The training, the pain, the battles he had fought, none of it had been just about winning a tournament. It had been about finding himself. And now it was about helping others do the same. As the session wrapped up, Alex met the eyes of the boy who had been the first to step forward. The child's expression had changed. He no longer looked like he wanted to disappear. "Thank you," he whispered. Alex's throat tightened. He smiled. "Anytime." Alex stood at the podium, the weight of his journey pressing against his chest as he looked out at the sea of faces before him. The auditorium was filled with students, teachers, parents, people who had gathered to hear him speak. "I stand before you not as a champion," Alex began, his voice steady, "but as proof of what's possible." The room was silent, captivated by the strength in his words. "I know what it's like to be afraid, to feel small, to think you have no way out." He let his gaze sweep across the crowd, meeting the eyes of those who needed to hear this the most. "But I also know what it's like to fight back, not with my fists but with my heart, with resilience, with the belief that I am worth more than my fears." A hush fell over the room. "Strength isn't just about how hard you can hit," Alex continued. "It's about how many times you can stand back up. It's about knowing your worth, even when others try to make you forget it." As he spoke, his words carried the weight of every tear, every scar, every lesson. But more than that, they carried hope. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. But the moment that stayed with him wasn't the clapping or the recognition. It was when a young girl approached him afterward, her eyes brimming with tears. "You've shown me that I can fight back," she whispered, her voice trembling with newfound determination. Alex placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his heart full. Because in that moment, he knew. His journey wasn't just about what he had overcome. It was about who he could help rise with him,